Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. If you haven't seen the new Baltimore Positive in WNST, we have the Keep Calm and Stay Local little logo up here. Don Moeller joining us. This is a Baltimore Positive-oriented chat. Former Baltimore County executive, always joining us, always brought to you by our friends at State Fair, as well as Fadley's, where they're doing curbside, they're doing carryout, they're even letting you take booze home. And I've told everybody that. Make sure we're washing our hands and staying safe during all of this. Little did we know, Don Moeller, that the last time we got together with Mary Miller, she was beginning her campaign, and there was all sorts of polling happening and crime and the city and this and that, and now all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, or whatever it's been, 7 weeks later, we find ourselves coordinating with all of the mayoral candidates here on Baltimore Positive at WNST about literally a modern plague. It's what a turn of events, correct?
Well, when we were standing with Mary, and Mary, welcome back to Baltimore Positive. Last time we were together, Mary was talking about sending Fadley's crab cakes out west to her son. We were looking at an election that was going to begin on April the 16th, and now all of a sudden, Mary, we're in a very, very different place, are we not?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Don and Nestor, for having me back. The world is certainly different from when we got together a few weeks ago.
In regard to all of this, and let's start with the campaign and talk about what it means for you and what it means to not be able to literally shake hands and kiss babies, right? I mean, the political expression. All of the candidates will be doing this in these kinds of ways. I think all of us are working. Everyone's been asked to do something else. But the political climate of the last 6 weeks and having a president call it a hoax to now it is clearly a public emergency of the magnitude, literally testing local government, testing hospitals, testing federal government, testing all facets of government in a way that have really never been tested in the modern era.
I couldn't agree more. I think the world has changed dramatically, and I think the response at every level of government is still evolving. I would say that in Baltimore, we've had, I think pretty good communication from the state, and I think Larry Hogan has really just led on this, and I think set a very good standard of making decisions that are hard ones to make, very hard ones to make, but I think the right ones for our state and our city. And I think the city's health department is really catching up in terms of communication and getting the word out about what we need to do. But it's a very serious situation. I spent some time this morning talking to Josh Sharfstein, former city health commissioner, former state health department leader, FDA official. He's about as knowledgeable as it can be. And I think we need to brace ourselves for some very tough weeks ahead.
Yeah, this is what, maybe you can, I don't know how much of that you're at liberty to share, Mary, but certainly Josh is as you said, one of the national leaders in the field of public health. Maybe you can give us an update from his perspective, because I think it's interesting that you said that on Thursday morning when you spoke with Dr. Sharfstein, you got a rather sobering update, because I had commented earlier to Nestor that I thought there was, not that he hadn't been serious all along and doing a great job, I'm referring to Governor Hogan, but that I thought that in Governor Hogan's Thursday morning address, there was an added level of somber, serious, and frustration with folks who were yet to take this seriously that I had not seen in previous days. And now I'm wondering if he had similar conversations with his health experts. So maybe you can bring our listeners up to speed as to what kind of picture Dr. Sharfstein painted for you.
Sure, and we'll put the whole interview up on my website so people can see that. That's at electmarymiller.com. And I think a few of the things he said that sort of jumped out at me are, one, why this particular virus is so much more aggressive and difficult than the normal flu. So understand those facts. Where we are on testing, which is we're still ramping up the capability to even test people, even as we see the number of cases reported growing. So we're still not where we need to be in terms of being able to offer testing to people, and that's a great worry. He also talked about this concept of flattening the curve, which is the healthcare communities desire not to see a huge spike in cases that would overwhelm healthcare resources. They would rather, by sequestering people at home, asking you not to have physical contact, really staying out of engagement, that you would have a lower number of cases, but perhaps over a longer period of time. And I think you might end up with the same number of cases, but by stretching the duration out, you don't overwhelm the healthcare resources. But that's not good news for people who want, a quick resolution of this, who think this is going to be over in 2 weeks. I think the message I'm getting is this is going to drag on for a while. And that might be a better outcome than having, a big spike that would be very difficult to absorb. And he also talked about, who are the most vulnerable people in Baltimore. And typically are people with pre-existing healthcare conditions. And some of the people living in our most impoverished communities in Baltimore. And it's why it's so important for people who are presumably healthy and don't feel they're at risk to still take the same steps to stay out of large engagement in social situations, because they can unwittingly transfer this to people who are going to be infected easily and will suffer more. So it was a bit sobering for me. And I think, at the end of the call, he basically sends a message, you got to take this seriously. Don't think that you're immune. Everyone needs to step up and follow the advice of our, governor and other elected officials.
Mary, as you know,
take it seriously.
My wife spent a couple years battling, and it was 6 years ago, literally today, that she was diagnosed. And I've told everybody all week, 6 years ago yesterday, I did not understand viruses and immune systems and why I had to wear a mask. And I literally went back and saw just how many times I had a mask on. Maybe I've forgotten the 200 days I wore a mask every day and washed my hands and wore rubber suits and did all of that because my wife had no immune system. I was 45 years old and college educated and like all of that and didn't understand it. I'm seeing the curve of our local humanity from being told by the leader of the free world it's a hoax to then being told by local people take this seriously to almost like a Jaws episode over the weekend, hey, get off the beach, to now Larry Hogan saying I've had to shut the bars because the bar owners and the patrons, no one wanted to adhere to this. There is a point where the leadership part of this, and we talk about trust so much, right? We talk about trust so much on your campaign trail and police and citizens and the community and how there has to be a public trust. This has literally been an issue where I trust Dr. Fauci, you know what I mean? Because I love me some smart guys who know more than me about all sorts of things, certainly on all things economic and your stature with the Obama administration. I would turn to you in the questions of crisis in these times. I find it fascinating that in our country we don't listen to experts often or as often as we should, and oftentimes can't identify an expert from a TV con man reality guy.
Well, that is unfortunate. I'd say that one thing I feel is we don't invest enough in emergency preparedness and risk management. So we're always reacting as opposed to being ahead of the curve. And I think the city's public health department in particular tries to do a lot with very little. And we, in particular, cut back on emergency preparedness, and that's a real problem. And I think if we learn anything from this episode, it's invest in being ready. So we're not scrambling to put things in place, that we know exactly where we're going to go when things go wrong. And so if there's any, silver lining to a crisis, and it's hard to even think that there can be, but if we learn something from this, that we need to be much more vigilant about, global pandemics and, taking steps to be ready at the local level, so we're not putting it in place, in a hasty manner, but that we can step up right away when we need to. I think that will be a good lesson.
Well, I think we've certainly seen that at the federal level. I think we see the peril of the failure to prepare, and I think your point comes through loud and clear there. Mary, when I think about you and your background, particularly some of the work that you did for President Obama during the economic recovery, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, because you've been through a crisis. You were there when the economy almost went off a cliff, and were charged with really taking over the federal response to that nationwide. What in that experience do you think prepares you to be the next mayor of Baltimore, assuming we get a crisis like this again on your watch?
Well, thank you for that question. I think, there are elements of this that remind me of Y2K, that remind me of Superstorm Sandy preparations, of government shutdowns, but also of trying to bring the economy back from the Great Recession. And if I have any words of advice for Baltimore, it's we need to be bold, we need to be aggressive, and we need to be direct in our response. If we take too much time, we're going to lose a lot in the short term. And I'll give you one example. If we look at the city of Baltimore's economy, that could be measured in something called GDP. In 2018, that figure was $52 billion. That was the economic activity of the city of Baltimore. If we have a 5% recession in the second quarter, you would take 5% out of a quarter of that number. That's $650 million of economic activity that just vanishes. And that is a real toll on people, on businesses, on nonprofits, on every single one of us. But it's particularly bad on the people who lose their jobs and income. So I'm suggesting that the city step in right now and use its rainy day fund to try to make some bridge loans to small businesses here, to nonprofits here, that will get them over this. Because the relief coming from the federal level, from the state level, is good, and it's strong. It's good air cover, but it takes too long. By the time those dollars reach a small business or an individual in Baltimore, they may have already failed. So I'm suggesting the city step in a very forceful way, use some of its reserves to really get some capital into the hands of people that are going to need it the most right now. And it really just speaks directly to my experience in the government, that when we tried to design things that were complicated, it just takes too long. And it's hard for the federal government to face an individual at ground level. So I think the city should step in here. They can be assisted as the funds come down from on high. But I would be really forceful right now, because I think the picture for the next few months is pretty grim. We've already seen unemployment claims jump 5 times from a week ago. So people are already feeling the pinch of this.
Well, our friends, Mary, you allude to in the city, a major part, as you know, in Baltimore City, of their economic base is the entertainment industry, restaurants, bars, hospitality industry, and our friends at Fadley's and our friends at State Fair. I mean, they are being devastated at this moment. What role, when you talk about getting the help to small business, in that is part of that assistance that you're suggesting, some kind of direct aid to the waiter and the waitress and the sous chef that suddenly, as you said, woke up 2 weeks ago. They had gainful employment. They had employment that helped them hold their head high. They felt good about what they were doing, and all of a sudden they're sitting at home and they have no job.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking of aid that will allow you to pay your employees through this interim period, because you want to come out the other end with the business still intact and able to start up again. Because if you can't keep people employed and pay the rent and pay your bills during this stretch, you'll fail. And then we'll come out of this with a weaker economic base than when we started. So I really consider this bridge loan assistance to keep businesses, even self-employed individuals that have businesses, and some of the nonprofits that are going to suffer here, and that may be service providers to the local economy. Keep them in business and allow them to get through this period. I would suggest a zero-interest loan for 6 months, for example, that at the end of 6 months, hopefully we'll be back in a growing economy again, and you can figure out how to pay that down. But I'm just worried about the very short-term hit we're taking here. I walk down the street and see closed signs on all these businesses, restaurants, and I think, how long can they remain in business before they have to pull the plug?
Right. And many of them, and I'd be curious, because, again, I think you bring a unique perspective to this. I'd be curious as to your thought about concepts like banks issuing mortgage holidays for a period of time. Is that something that should be on the table as well? Because it seems to me it's not only the tenant in the restaurant, but it's the proprietor, it's the landowner who also is
It's the
facing
sports
mortgage
radio station owner at WNST who has bars and restaurants who keep my lights on, who can't pay me because they can't pay their employees, and then I can't pay my employees, then I can't pay my mortgage, right? So I am a small business owner, so you're talking about me.
Absolutely. And we're already seeing that kind of guidance coming down from the federal regulators that are saying to banks, ease up, help your customers, keep them alive. And that's unusual. You know, in the financial crisis in 2008, the banks themselves were the problem. They're not the problem right now. The real economy is the problem because it's taking the brunt of this. And so I think the message from on high is ease up, provide some relief, help people get through this period, because the best thing to do is to keep that business, that entity going, so that when we get through the healthcare pandemic, you can come out the other end and you can survive and continue. That's what we need to protect right now.
Mary Miller is here. She is running for mayor. You've seen her on TV. You've seen her on Baltimore Positive. We are chatting with all of the mayoral candidates right around this period. We've moved the election from April 28th to June 2nd. Got a couple of extra weeks, a lot to do with it, but there's no shaking hands or kissing babies or the usual politician things to do here as we do have an election moving forward. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and I've asked all the candidates about this, crime was number one, and it was number two, and it was 3 and 4 and 5 for all of you, and has been and is for me as a citizen at the Inner Harbor. And we've talked so much about policing and trust and murder rates, all of those things. The only thing anybody's talking about right now is this virus and how to keep Hopkins and Maryland and Sinai and Mercy and all of our other institutions, LifeBridge, all of them in order and not overloaded because of this virus. Then there's the crime part of that I remember when Freddie Gray happened. Criminals prayed in the aftermath of that. We've seen looting here. We've also seen periods where we've had snowmageddons where there were no murders, and the weather's getting better. There's all of this concoction of things happening here. Everyone's sort of restless. No one has anything they can do or will do. And we're under-policed. I think we're all sort of in agreement that we don't have enough policing. Some thoughts about crime and what happens here over the next 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to stem what was already not such a good situation?
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the ways to restore trust in the community in Baltimore with policing is to have police be more engaged in the community and more visible. This would be a great time to have police checking on elderly residents in the city, checking on kids who are not in school, just being more present. So I hope what we'll see is more evidence of police on the streets and engaged in sort of normal interactions with citizens to make sure that they're rebuilding relationships. So this is the perfect environment to see more of that and to make sure that we're de-escalating cases where there might be more violence. I was on the phone earlier today with someone who lives in Cherry Hill, which has had a very good record with Safe Streets. And they say the reason for that are the Safe Streets participants are from the neighborhood. They engage directly with citizens and youth who are at risk of committing crimes, and it works. So I think more of that right now would be essential and would be very, very valuable. I also think on the positive side of this crisis, we're seeing some extraordinary examples of generosity, where people are really stepping up and doing things for their neighbors, volunteering. You know, the food bank that is now working with Baltimore City schools. I think that it can bring out the best in people too. And I think we should all think about that. Can we help in some way with kids that need to do schoolwork? Is there a way that we can do that virtually or on the internet? Can we provide internet assistance to people who don't have that? So I just want to keep saying, this is an opportunity to really step up, everyone.
Oh, Mary, I could not agree more. Folks that listen to the show regularly know that I have a daughter who is an elementary school principal, and I have been in awe over the past 4 or 5 days over what she and her staff have done to continue to try to support moms and dads and grandmoms and granddads and aunts and uncles who are trying now to homeschool children, and the way those educators have stepped up. It's just been actually amazing to watch that. I mean, I watched, even in the midst of this crisis, as you said, when small businesses getting hit more than ever, I watched, restaurants step up in the beginning and say, we'll feed your children if they can't get fed during this. So I think you're right. I think there's a sense of community that we can tap into, that, out of this darkness, there may be some sunshine that is a positive outcome. Why we say that, Mary, I want to go back again to the crisis itself, and that is, I think now more than ever, folks who are going to be making a decision about this mayoral race recognize the great job that, the governors have done all across the country, and the county executives have done all across the country, and mayors have done all across the country. And I think they're looking at this through a slightly different lens, and they're saying, okay, can this person manage this crisis when we have one again? Because we will have another. And I wonder if you can give us, take us behind the curtain to the Miller administration in how it would approach a crisis like this, and what you would say to voters to say, I hear you, I understand the anxiety, and here's why I'm the person that can manage this for you in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best characteristics you can have in a leader during a crisis is someone who can remain calm and can think strategically about the next thing coming around the corner and how we're positioned for that, and to be really prepared. And so I think as mayor, I would want to put more in place of what I call risk management. So we're not reacting, but we are very proactive in terms of our activity. And I think that's what I did in the private sector. That's what I did in the Obama administration, because we had a lot of events that came at us. A government shutdown for 3 weeks. I had 10% of my staff doing 100% of the work. Superstorm Sandy shut down the East Coast, and we were coordinating with FEMA, with every federal agency, to keep the financial pipelines open during a superstorm. I think if you've had those experiences, it's really useful because you know what can go wrong and what could go off the rails, and you can be ready for the next time with more fortitude and with more ideas of what needs to be put in place. But probably the most important element is strong communication, because right now we need to make sure people in Baltimore don't panic, that they have the right information in their hands and they know what to expect, and that they know that we care. I think there's a lot of compassion and empathy that a leader needs to deliver during a crisis, to say, I understand what you're worried about. I understand some of the steps we're taking are really hard ones, but you need to know that the right steps, because it will get us through this and we'll come out the other side in a stronger position. So I think those are the things. If you can remain calm, you can be prepared and ready, and if you can communicate just relentlessly with people so that they feel comfortable that you are in charge and that you do know what's happening and you are making the right decisions for them. That's what I saw in my time in the government and working through the financial crisis, and that's what I do.
We are chatting with Mary Miller, mayoral candidate, former longtime T. Rowe Price executive, member of the Obama administration in the Treasury Department, was tasked with leading the United States recovery at time of economic crisis under President Obama. Mary, we can't let you get away today without talking about campaigning and what's now the new reality, and at the same time, allowing you to talk a little bit about some good news. I was telling Nestor earlier, we were discussing your poll, and recently it came out, and you are seeing movement in a poll, in recent poll numbers, that you don't typically see in a local race, whether it be county executive or a mayoral race. You don't normally see the kind of growth that your campaign is displaying. So we're going to let you talk a little bit about that poll, why it was encouraging, and why you think you're getting such a bump as the campaign moves along.
Sure. Yes, we were very heartened by a poll that took place over the past weekend, and what it showed is from our starting position in January, when I jumped into the race and had no or very little name recognition, we'd moved from 2% to 12%, and that was the most significant move among the top contenders in the field. I think what it's showing is as I get my name recognition out there, which also jumped from 35% a few weeks ago to 68% by the weekend, that our work to get my message out there across the city seems to be working. It seems to be resonating with voters. And we saw very strong pickup across the city in lots of demographics, which is really helpful. So with the change in the campaign to an all-virtual campaign, we'll just keep up the media work that we're doing and at the same time try to keep my voice out there in virtual ways. So we're doing a lot of Zoom conferences. We're doing a lot of outreach to voters, influencers, community leaders. I'm on the phone all day long, I would say that. But we have to find different ways to communicate. But we can keep going with the print media and with television and radio and just try to keep increasing my name recognition. And now we have an extra 5 weeks to June 2nd, so that's more runway for this.
Is that helpful for you, Mary?
I think so.
Extra time?
I absolutely think so. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would ask this. Why did you wait so late to get in to begin with? You wanted a shorter runway, did you not? You chose it that way, right?
Well, I made the decision late last fall. We decided to wait till after the holidays to jump in. We just thought the holidays were not the best moment to launch a campaign, and we wanted to prepare ourselves and be ready so that when we launched, we'd be ready to run. So we've been working towards this April 28th date as a hard sprint. Now we've gotten, good polling results showing we're getting some traction, so now we have an extra 5 weeks, which I think is helpful. So we'll just keep going as we are and just keep doing what we're doing because it seems to be working.
As a citizen, started this thing, a year and a half ago to talk about literally this. Who our next mayor would be. Nothing would be more important to Baltimore Positive and to me selling my condo, having businesses to do business with, having a baseball team to talk about, having all the things that were important to me as a citizen and as a person with a voice. The thing that I'm so heartened about with all of this is whether it's been you or Brandon or Theroux or TJ or Sheila or Jack, all the people we've talked to and coming and seeing different podiums before you were even in the race. I went to a forum in Morgan. There were 14 people there. There's been a really hearty conversation, right? And we're going to get another month and a half on the back end of whatever this horrible thing is and during this period of time to talk about what we want as citizens and what we want the future of Baltimore to be. I think it's been a very healthy conversation the last 6 months for me.
But, Nestor, if I can pick up on that before, Mary, because you led right into where I was going with my question, and that is, Mary, you talked about you have more time now to get out about, go to churches, go to community centers, go to improvement associations, and your message is getting across. But at the same time, why we want to keep having the candidates on leading up to June 2nd is that you can continue to communicate with voters. But I think we asked you this the first time we got together, and we're going to continue to ask it. I think it's embedded in Nestor's question. What is it, as you go from group to group to group, that you're hearing from Baltimore City voters? When they say to you, Mary, you need to know X. What's X? What do they want you to know?
I think people are so frustrated and discouraged with past leadership and the failure to address our public safety problems and to bring any sense of hope or opportunity to such a broad swath of the population. That's what I hear. People want a change. They want a turnaround mayor who's going to get the city back on track, who's going to have a much more constructive message about Baltimore, who's going to work constructively with the police commissioner, with all of our public safety agencies to reduce crime and get this city back on track. That's what I hear. And I think that people are hungry for change. That comes across clearly in the polls. It comes across in every conversation I'm in. I have to be clear. I'm not going to churches and community centers these days, so we have to reach people differently. But we're not going to let up on that message that we hear you. You are asking for something different, and we will offer that. We will offer a much stronger form of leadership and change for Baltimore, and I think that's what people want.
Now, I want to jump back just quickly to the poll because you mentioned you were up to 12 percentage points, and my recollection in that poll, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, was that there was a margin of error of, I want to say 4.7, 4.9%, which basically puts you and Sheila and Brandon in a dead heat. Am I correct in remembering that poll correctly?
The margin of error I see is 4.4%.
4.4, okay.
Yeah, the numbers are all pretty close. I mean, I was within 5 percentage points of Brandon and 6 of Sheila. So, and we still have 11% who say they're undecided. So there's room to work in that space. And what
the race
we also
is
saw,
dead heat.
well, I think we saw from January to March that I took share away from just about every candidate. So that's interesting. And I think that, that's where, we have room to do more. And we also had one candidate, of course, drop out this week, Mary Washington, which also changes the math on this.
What would you like to say to Senator Washington supporters who were very active, very passionate? She had a core base of supporters who really believed in her. If some of them are listening right now, what would you say to Senator Washington's supporters?
I would say I have the greatest admiration for her, and I'm thankful that we have her in her state legislature seat because I think she's very good for Baltimore, and I hope that she will support my campaign for mayor.
Mary, it's been a great visit. We really appreciate you making some time. I know you came down to Fadley's a couple weeks ago. We all wish we could get together and do more than elbow bump or talk on phone lines and whatnot. And I don't know how a mayor candidate doesn't shake hands and kiss babies, right? It works against all traditional logic about campaigns, right?
I've got sore elbows.
That's where I'm going to give you a test. We test everybody on the website. Don't peek at your phone now. Don't peek at your computer. Where do folks go to get more information on Mary if they want to find out more about Mary Miller?
Thank you. Yes, please go to my website, electmarymiller.com. We're also out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so please follow me. And look at some of the position papers we've put out on some of the key issues for Baltimore.
Virtual hugs, handshakes, baby kissing, politicianing, all that stuff, but certainly on a daily basis. I would think you are at home and just doing some public things at this point. I mean, thoughts about where the end of this is, really? And is June 2nd really realistic in your mind as this thing unfolds?
Well, that's the date the governor has set out, so I think we'll stick with that for now. I'm not engaged in any, public forums where we're meeting in person. I think the guidance is to stay in groups of smaller than 10 people. So I am certainly doing one-on-ones with people and, very small meetings if people are comfortable. And of course, we keep our distance.
6 feet.
Doing a lot more virtual meetings.
Well,
Mary,
go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, we certainly look forward to having you on regularly as we go towards June 2nd, because we think one of the commitments that we're making at Baltimore Positive is we all may be quarantined, but we're going to do our best to allow voters to hear from the candidates, basically question the candidates through us, so that they can continue to be involved in this race that's so very, very important. Because as Nestor and I always say, Nestor, what is it? Democracy is not?
It's not a spectator sport. We got to roll our sleeves up. We got to make this thing happen. Mary, take care of yourself. Good luck on the campaign trail. We will meet again. We appreciate y'all being a part of what we were going to do on April 14th. We're going to reschedule that a little closer to the election and hope to have a forum with all of you again. Stay safe, and as my new logo here says, keep calm, stay local, and stay Baltimore positive, and stay safe. And I'm telling everybody this, so no offense. Wash your hands. Everybody wash your hands, right? That's the public message.
Great advice. Thank you so much to both of you.
You got it. Mary Miller, she's electmarymiller.com, the way to find her. Baltimore Positive is rolling along. Mayoral candidates, Don and I are going to be getting together. All sorts of Baltimore businesses coming together, including curbside takeout for all of our sponsors that can stay open, whether it's Pizza John's, State Fair, Al's Seafood, Fadley Seafood, Costas, all of our restaurants. We're all in this together. Stop, support your local business, call ahead, get some carry out, take care of each other, be kind to each other, and don't forget, wash your hands. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, keeping calm, staying local, and staying Baltimore positive.